What's up, Dreamedia family? This is Zach. Welcome back to another episode. Today, we are going to be talking about the ultimate video processor. Whether you have a projector, a TV, or a massive video wall, you have to consider getting a MadVR Envy. Today, we are going to be meeting with Richard, the CEO and co-founder of MadVR on Shane Lee's channel. If you're not familiar with Shane Lee, you gotta check out his channel. He has a ton of really informative home theater inspiration for you guys. All right, well, if you would like to purchase, be sure to reach out today. Dreamedia is nationwide and we'd love the opportunity to earn your business. All right, let's get into this live stream.
Hey guys, this is Gene from Audioholics, and I'm happy to be working with Dreamedia. Dreamedia is a home cinema and audio company that I highly recommend, and I'm proud to have as an official channel sponsor.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to another episode of the Home Theater Hangout, but today we are joined by the usual crew from Dreamedia. What's up, Zach and Kellen? And then we've also got a special guest from MadVR. We've got Richard. He's the CEO. How's it going, Richard? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks guys for having us on. This is always exciting to see you, especially virtually. We're happy to be here. The MadVR Envy, for those of you who don't know, it's a video processor that goes in line between your typically your AVR and your projector, your display, and it has all sorts of different bells and whistles, ways to make the image really pop and add a lot of excitement to the theater in several different ways, which we'll get into. So that's it in a nutshell.
And Zach, how do you guys use MadVR in your installs?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're always on the hunt here at Dreamedia, trying to find the latest and greatest for you guys so that you can make educated buying decisions on what to put into your home theater. MadVR is paving the way. I would consider them the ultimate video processor. Nobody in the industry does it better than them. Today, we're going to be talking about their HDR tone mapping, the Motion AI, which is a newer feature with MadVR. We're going to be talking about their nonlinear stretch, NSL, and instant AR detection and handling, as well as the subtitle management, which is huge with ultra wide, as well as geometry correction. Kellen's made a full-blown detailed walkthrough video on that for you guys as well, which we'll link the video to that down below. We're going to be talking about calibration as well as upscaling the 1080p content for like standard television content. You can use this processor for about everything, which we're going to dive deep into those details here shortly, as well as the remote dealer support. So I wanted to toss it off to Kellen, our national sales director, to give some real life scenarios on how all of these elements are enabling us here at Dreamedia to create the ultimate home experience for our customers. Over to you, Kellen.
Yeah, thank you guys. So, first and foremost, I think the most popular way that we use MadVR is going to be the nonlinear stretch. A lot of customers don't want to see the dreaded black bars, so to speak. And so with the MadVR, we're able to kind of eliminate those black bars. We're able to take 16:9 content and do a very good job of disguising to make it fit a anamorphic or cinemascope screen, so a 240-235 aspect ratio. And subtitle management is another good one. Whenever we're running a cinemascope screen with 240, a lot of times those subtitles are shot below the screen onto the wall or onto a piece of fabric to be lost and never seen. So you have no idea what people are talking about in a movie. MadVR will kind of bring those onto the display area. And I think one that we haven't really had a use case just yet for, but we will soon, is these LED walls. We're going to be doing some creative things with multiple aspect ratios, 24:9, 32:9, and MadVR does a good job keeping everything in a Rec 709 container to try to trick different sources with HDR, SDR. So we'll be using some MadVRs kind of in a different way than the typical way that you see them now on our channel here at Dreamedia.
So you've prepared a slide for us, Richard. Do you want to take a quick peek at that?
Yeah, sure. So this is the best way to kind of explain what the Envy is, kind of the hero features, if you will, in a nutshell. And the way we like to do this is we came up with this mnemonic called Music HD. Just kind of makes it really easy to understand and remember kind of those key features, right? So we'll start with the M, and music stands for Motion AI. This is the world's first AI-based motion interpolation, which is really exciting and something that has really been turning heads. So we'll talk about that more when we get further into the presentation. You also have upscaling. A lot of people are still watching 1080p content, especially from TV or 1080p Blu-rays. So being able to upscale those to 4K, 5K, 8K is really critical. We're the only video processor in the market that can do those higher end upscaling resolutions. Being able to do things such as subtitle management, like you guys were just talking about, subtitles in a scope movie on a scope screen are very challenging and problematic. So we'll go into how we go about solving that. And then you also have the incredible nonlinear stretch, and apologies, we had to come up with an I to make the mnemonic work. But basically the nonlinear stretch, as we'll also go into, and Zach, back to what you were saying earlier, it's just really key for being able to enjoy the screen with a full level of immersion, and getting rid of those pesky black bars is key. The C stands for control. So there's all aspects of control. We probably won't cover all the details, but for example, calibration. The Envy has the largest 3D and 1D LUTs, up to 4,096 points, where more typically you might find 4,000 or 5,000 points. And with the Envy, you're 4,096, and more typically those are just 17 points. And then the 3D LUTs, we go all the way up to 16.7 million interpolated points, as opposed to roughly about 4,000 or 5,000. But also other things about control, like we talked about anamorphic lenses, being able to do geometry correction. So being able to control the geometry of the screen is very important for really being able to eke out all that performance out of what's capable on your projector. And also things like IP control. So like interfacing with Crestron, Control 4, Savant, like these types of technologies, integrating with screen masking, if you want, and remote control. Zach, you had mentioned, remote control. The Envy allows, with the end user's prior permission, the dealer can connect and control the whole system just like they were in the room with the end user, which is very comforting for the end user, very convenient for the dealer, not having to necessarily roll a truck, to help not just with things Envy related, but even to see what's going on in the system, because the dealer is able to see and control the video as well. And then, of course, the HDR tone mapping and detecting aspect ratios. We're going to talk a lot about that as well. But that's really kind of like, the bird's eye view of the key hero features.
Awesome, Richard. Well, I can't wait to take a deep dive into some of these features. I did want people to kind of be aware of the history of MadVR. And you guys are new to the market, but you're absolutely dominating. So kind of share a little bit about your awards, and tell us a little bit about what you guys have been up to, because you've been featured in every single booth at all the major trade shows, and obviously we love you guys. Just tell them how it started and where you're at right now.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. No, I appreciate you saying that. On the awards, we're very proud about that. We won several awards at CEDIA. Last year, for example, we won 5 awards, including CEDIA's Best New Hardware Product Global. That was really exciting. In 2024, we've already won several awards, even though we're a couple months in, including AVS Forum top pick for 2024. So we're very proud of that. We're working hard for that, and we really appreciate that recognition. The company really started as my need for this, right? At the root of things, I'm a enthusiast, a movie lover. I want the best experience, and I built my midlife crisis theater, as my wife likes to call it, about 5-6 years ago, and everything was, I got to tell you, came out great, right? The furniture and the chairs were comfortable. The sight lines were exactly as designed. The audio sounded great. The lighting looks phenomenal. Just really love it. But when I would kick back and try to enjoy it, the video was driving me crazy. Like the HDR was too dark, highlights were blown out. Dealing with the motorized lens memory and these aspect ratios was just driving me nuts. And so I looked around in the market. There was nothing really out there that was a video processor that I wanted for myself and my theater. And I knew my partner, Matthias, who's my co-founder and the inventor of MadVR. I knew about his work that had been done on MadVR and algorithms, kind of in the underground, if you will. And he had basically been working on this stuff for about 10 years, right? So I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I approached Matthias and said, hey, you ever thought about making this into, a business or commercializing this? And he said, I'd love to one day, but I'm always so busy with everything. And so it was really a match made in heaven. I run the whole business side of things. He runs the tech side of things. And fast forward to today, we launched in 2020. And now we've got customers and distribution in nearly 40 countries. So it's been a really wild ride and experienced a lot of continued growth. So we thank our exceptional dealers and distributors and partners for that, and for helping champion the product, as well as our customers are the best customers. They really are passionate about the product. And I like to tell people, I might be the CEO, but at the end of the day, I'm one of the product's biggest fans, right? And the features you see are things that I push and ask for, just like an end user will. So with all of us in the company being movie lovers and really into the experience, it's easy to get passionate and share that passion with all the customers. So that's really a brief history in a nutshell.
Congratulations, Richard.
Yeah, thanks.
You guys are just killing it. I love it. Make sure you keep it up. So now I want to take a deep dive into these features that we just reviewed. So Shane, if you could pop that visual back up so that he could really take a deep dive into each individual category with an on-screen visual. I think that'd be very helpful for the audience. Guys, we're trying to make this a very informative, long format video for anybody who may be considering MadVR. So we're gonna take our time today. If you have questions, we're gonna address all of those at the end of the live stream. I really appreciate everybody's support. All right, off to you, Richard.
Yeah, so we might as well start with what it is physically, right? So this is the Envy Extreme Mark II. The Envy Pro Mark II looks essentially identical. We released this product back in April. It was a second generation Envy. Big differences here is the case and the aesthetics. So this is a 4-rack unit, beautiful 20 millimeter front laser etched case. It looks great, feels great to the touch. It's exceptional emphasis placed on cooling and quality of the components. So one of the things we wanted to do, the Envy previous generation had a 3-year warranty. So we really wanted to offer a best-in-class 5-year warranty, just to give the extra assurance to the customer that we stand behind the product, we believe in the product, and we feel that the quality control and the components are at such a level that we can do that and make that something that the customers really appreciate. So that's kind of a look at the front. The cooling is really, there was a lot of emphasis on the cooling design. It uses a massive GPU inside these things, so anyone that has like a gaming rig can know how loud and how hot those run. So one of the key designs was to make the Envy silent and run cool. And we were able to achieve that through some engineering, which involves 340 millimeter fans along the side and 220 millimeter fans you can actually see in the reflection. You can actually see the vents for those kind of under the horizontal bar in that reflection. Those are your 120 millimeter vents and or fans. And then the vents on the top and the open vent design on the back really help keep the unit cool to the touch and whisper quiet. I mean, we've got different modes for, you know, running it in rack mode if you don't care about, you know, the volume, or if you really, some people, they have the rack 2-3 feet from them, and so we wanted to remember those as well, and those needs. So we actually have a silent mode, and you literally cannot hear the unit unless you're, you know, within a couple of feet of it. Another little fine touch too. You saw the light on the other side. There's a little toggle switch that you can't really see here, but underneath the unit, you turn that light off if you got that rack 2 feet from you. So, you know, a lot of attention to detail. Yeah, let's flip around to the back side now. So this is the back. So you can see here, you've got your one input and your zero latency pass through, along with your output connection for LAN, and you know the remote control. It's beautiful backlit remote. We'll show you that next. But it's IR and RF, and allows you to do all sorts of things. So you can put it in the rack, go into the next room, and still use it, you know, just fine. The typical, the signal chain, like I talked about earlier, you're going to go from, you know, your sources into your AVR, and then from your AVR into the MV input, and then out where it says output to your wall or your projector or your display, whatever it may be. And you push a button on the front and you're up and rolling. If you want to move ahead to the next one, just a quick look at the backlit remote control. We've been getting a lot of great feedback on the remote control. People are really happy with it. Feels great in the hand. Where is that? Here, I have this here. If you want to zoom back on me, I'll just show you a little behind the scenes. This is, I don't know if you can see it, maybe with the lighting. This is kind of how this remote control started. Right. So everything is meticulously planned out with the 3D model, tested in our hand to see how we like it, making sure that every nook and cranny is designed to provide that perfect experience, perfect weight balance, ergonomically ideal. And it's really cool. People love the fact, not just the backlighting, but you know, this, you've got range up to 30, 40, 50 feet. So this can be in your rack, and you can use it still from the other room for those that don't have a control system.
Oh, so it's RF.
Yeah, there's actually a switch on the underside where the battery compartment is, where you can actually switch between IR and RF. But almost everyone uses it in in an RF type of situation, and it's really great. Those colored buttons you see are what we call flex keys, so it allows you to assign those to any functions that you want. So, for example, you can assign it so that the flex key turns on and off nonlinear stretch, or turns on and off motion AI, or changes the strength of motion AI, which you might want to do based on the content that you're watching at the time. We'll talk about that a little bit later. You can also assign those buttons to profiles. So you can create a profile that has, your ideal settings for maybe sports or daytime viewing or whatever you like. Put those in one profile, and you assign, let's say the blue button to activate profile sports, and then you click blue and you're up. So it's great for those who, not everyone has a control system. And so these are really important factors to keep in mind to just deliver that, that really exceptional experience that we are striving for every day.
Yeah, that's great. Those were a couple of little things that I think we missed in our unboxing video that we did. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's next?
So let's kind of get into, we kind of talked about our hero features. Certainly, MadVR is well known for best in class HDR dynamic tone mapping. This is an example for those that may not be aware of the importance of tone mapping. This is something that all displays do in one form or another if they support HDR. And but they're all done differently, right? There's no real standards per se. And so it's very much an art as much as it is a science. My partner Matthias had been doing this, I think even well before it was called dynamic tone mapping. And so, like, this is an example here. The left side of this image is with a popular projector that had displayed these, and these are actual untouched photographs on both sides. Both with the display that's very well known for doing a good job with HDR tone mapping, and you can see here it is being done quite well. But when you get over to the Envy side, you see kind of the full potential, maximizing contrast, minimizing or eliminating any kind of black crush or lifting of the blacks or crushing of the whites, right? And so this kind of just helps frame for people that may not be familiar why tone mapping is so important. And just because your display does tone mapping doesn't mean that it does tone mapping in an ideal way, right? Because most people, you're watching a movie on the left, you wouldn't even realize what you were missing until you see what it can be on the right.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, guys. Kellen, maybe you can give a little insight as to some real life scenarios where you have seen insane performance with and without the Envy.
Yeah, no, I think with the JVC that we carry and that we have in our showroom, I think the highlight retention is more prevalent than the shadow detail, just because I think the JVC does a great job with black levels, but the MadVR just makes everything more, I'll say, neutral in the fact that you definitely have granular control over how much shadow detail you want further or how much refinement. But really, in the highlights is where I see it really dialing back to basically not making the projector the handicap at that point. It's really going to take the image and use your projector's full potential to make it look the best in terms of HDR content.
You want to talk a little bit about video walls, Kellen, and ways that it can help there as well? We're taking a deep dive, guys, into everything video walls. We're going to be talking about every single different technology currently on the market, as well as the power supplies, enclosure, and processors that they're using. So, of course, at our partners Just Video Walls facility, they had to have the MadVR Envy Extreme. So, Kellen, maybe you can touch on that a little bit, because you guys are going to be seeing a lot of video walls coming to our channel here soon.
Yeah, so whenever you're running a multi-aspect ratio or a 24:9 or 32:9, if you're trying to incorporate a standard 16:9 with two additional, picture-in-picture is the best way that I can describe it. You're going to have the opportunity to have, multiple sources. And with that, you're going to have difficulties with the containers that those colors and the video lives in. So you're going to have your standard SDR content, and you're going to have HDR. If you try to send SDR content while it's trying to read HDR, or if you're trying to send HDR to SDR, you know that there's going to be issues. If you've ever ran across it, you can see sometimes it's like a lime green with pinkish. It just doesn't look right on your display. So the MadVR does a good job of keeping everything kind of in a SDR container, whether or not it is an HDR. And Richard, you can probably elaborate on it further too, but it's really going to help in the video wall spectrum whenever you're having to go through one of their video processors in terms of where the actual sources get displayed on the actual wall itself. The MadVR is going to help take multiple sources, whether it's HDR and SDR, to play nicely on the display wall or your display.
Nice.
Yeah.
There's a couple of features that I really want to take a deep dive into that was notable with video walls and the MadVR, but we're gonna be touching on those things shortly. So Richard, I'll let you continue forward with your presentation here. What do we have next, Shane?
Let's question for you really quick, Richard. For people that want to buy this, is this relegated to only projectors, or can you use this with TVs? Anything else?
Yeah, no, I mean, any type of display will benefit from the NB. I saw someone ask a question like, "Hey, Ariel's asking, hey, should an Epson LS 12,000 look similar to the NZ9?" I think the real question becomes yes, just as long as you don't then also put an NB on the NZ9, right? So it is a great equalizer. We always like to tell people from our experience and the feedback that we get that it doesn't really matter if you put it on a $5,000 projector, it can potentially outperform a $30,000 projector. But if you put it on a $30,000 projector, it can outperform a $100,000 projector in some cases, and so forth. Not in every area, but you get the general sense. So the whole key is have an NV on each display that you're using it on. And so it's great for projectors, especially if you've got a scope screen, but also for video walls. And we're going to talk more about like motion AI and HDR tone mapping, why that's all critical, along with nonlinear stretch on these video walls when we get a little bit further in.
If you have one of these large TVs that are coming out, like say a 100-inch Hisense or 115-inch TCL with a Dolby Vision, would I want to put an NV on that? Or since it has Dolby Vision, would the NV outperform a Dolby Vision disc or content for tone mapping?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's a fair question. So I think you have to look and compare the two. The great equalizer in the Envy is one of the things it can do is it can adjust inter-scene contrast. So it's not just scene by scene, but actually dynamic frame by frame tone mapping. So for example, if you had someone in a dark bedroom and there's a candlelight in the background and the lighting is just right and the contrast is maximized, if someone was to sit up and lean forward and now all of a sudden their shoulder is blocking a lot of the light coming out of that candle and the image gets a lot darker, at this point the envy will very slowly, without you knowing it, continue to optimize the contrast of what's going on in that frame, and it's looking several frames ahead. So there's a lot of advantages that we bring to the table, but even beyond tone mapping, there's things like the motion AI and the motion handling and things such as the nonlinear stretch, 16 by 9. We'll talk about this a little bit when we get to the nonlinear stretch section, but nonlinear stretch is phenomenal for people that have 16 by 9 screens as well, to be able to bring back some of that lost immersion due to those giant black bars on the top and bottom of the screen, right? When you're watching a scope movie on a 16 by 9 screen, it can be brutal, right? And we've all kind of felt the wind come out of the room when, you see a movie come on with scope and you got this big bars and the wife is like, oh, it's one of these. Like, well, yeah, they're mostly one of those, but these are ways that you can use a product to combat that. And, I'll highlight that as we go forward.
All right, so we got dynamic tone mapping, contrast recovery.
So this is just an example. Like our dynamic tone mapping consists of several different layers that are patent pending. This is one of them. Contrast recovery is the ability to restore contrast that's usually lost. So for example, if you look at box 5, you can just see like this would be typically what you would expect to see on any display. We're not picking on any particular one. They all very much will be within a certain percentage of what you see here. But you will not typically see what you see in the with envy section unless you're with an envy. You can see all that detail and like around the headlights, right, and the trim that's there. Or another great way to look at it as well is look at box 2, those little Lego nubs and the street, like especially like towards the bottom of box 2. Like look how hazy and kind of like grayed out like that area is, that lack of contrast. And this is literally a contrast recovery. And that's why when you look at the bottom of where the with envy image is, in that same area of the street, that is actually much cleaner and clearer. And this also, by the way, these are back-to-back photos taken with the displays, tone mapping on, and then switching over to the Envy to use its tone mapping. If you want to roll to the next one, and I think Kellen, you were really talking about the highlights, and this is our highlight recovery. And so what you can see here is the great amount of detail So, for example, look at the very top of the light dome on the side where there's the Envy, the with Envy side. You see all these kind of nooks and crannies and all this texture in there. And then now look at it on the opposite side without Envy. It's just kind of like washed over, right? You're missing so much detail and so much content. And even just in the inner ring itself, right? You can just see how much more detail and contrast is there. And the trick is, can you do this while also being bright, right? Because what happens is if your display is blowing out the highlights, you can kind of turn back the HDR to recover some of those highlights, but then you're compressing the dynamic range and you're kind of defeating the whole point of HDR. You're making the image look more SDR. And so, like, for example, what our dynamic tone mapping does natively and then topped off with some highlight recovery is the ability to maximize that contrast difference even between the very bright pixels that are right next to each other. And that creates that delineation where you can actually see the difference it makes there.
Yeah, you can definitely tell when it's trying to do that with other things. The image can look really artificial and muted, but the MadVR does a really good job of keeping those specular highlights super bright looking, but really gaining back a lot of the detail. That's you just uncover a lot of the detail that's in those highlights very well.
Right, absolutely, yes. So let's move on and talk about aspect ratios because this is really critical. And this it doesn't really matter if you're talking about a scope screen or a a 16:9 screen or a video wall with 16:9 or 21:9 or 32:9 or whatever your aspect ratio is. The Envy can fit any aspect ratio content to any aspect ratio screen without any need to adjust the projector zoom or to adjust the display and the display zoom. And so there's a couple different aspects of this. Right now, what we're talking about is constant image height, also known as CIH, just a fancy-ish way of saying that the image height is always the same, and that would be the height of your screen. Okay. And typically what happens if this was scope content is when you look at scope content with the projector set, like you would watch it on 16:9, you see the image surrounded by 4 black bars, right? One on the top, 2 down the side, and 1 on the bottom. And then for those with scope screens, you're familiar with this. You either manually adjust your zoom or you press a button and the projector zooms out until all 4 corners fill the image, and that's great. But now the problem happens. What happens when the content now switches back to 16:9? And it doesn't matter if it's going back and forth like it is in this example from Interstellar, or if it's going back and forth because you've played a movie and now you're going back to the Apple TV menu at 16:9. When you do that, and I'm sure a lot of the people in your audience that are watching this will recognize what happens is now your content is spilling off the screen onto the ceiling and down onto the floor. And so then you have to reach for the remote or manually get up and change the zoom to zoom back to the point where now the content 16:9 is back on the screen, right? Then as soon as you select your next scope movie, you're back in the same situation. And so this back and forth is really a nuisance for integrators as well as for customers. And so what the Envy does is it will instantly, truly instantly, without missing a single frame, fit the content to the height of the screen and leave you with these black bars. So if this movie's going back and forth, you don't have to pick, do I want to watch scope and zoomed out, which fills the screen for the scope content, but then when you're watching the 16:9 content, it's on the floor and the ceiling. Or do you want to watch like a postage stamp when it's 16:9, but at least it fits when it's scope, but at least it fits when it's 16:9. And then that naturally leads to discussion of what do we do about the black bars?
Yeah, this is the number one reason we use so many Envies. And it's kind of hard to understand because a lot of people are like, well, I got lens memory. Like you said, Richard, I can program those in and just switch back and forth. But you watch a couple movies And although it may be a first world problem, it becomes real frustrating and kind of annoying very quickly, especially if regardless of what you spend on your theater, you want to sit down and be able to just kick back and watch the whole movie. Those movies where it's switching aspect ratios, I mean, the lens memory really isn't a solution for those movies. What are you going to do? Like, oh no, 15 seconds in, it's about to switch, and then do your lens memory? No, it's not reality. You're not going to do that. So if you want a seamless experience, that's really where the Envy shines.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a game changer because it is going to increase the level of immersion. There's some people that say, hey, I want to watch as the director intended, and it's your theater, and you're certainly welcome, of course, to watch however you prefer. And there's some people that say the opposite, say, I paid all this money for this screen, and I want to fill it, and I don't want these black bars. They're bothersome to me. And we feel that they have a right to their opinion to watch how they want to watch. But at the end of the day, there's really no argument against using it for sports, right? Because sports is much more, immersive. And when you're watching on a scope screen, like whether you're watching, the Super Bowl or the basketball championship or the World Series, whatever it is, when you're watching these games on the big screen, and it is the big screen, the experience is just in a whole nother league. So if we go back to that slide, I'll show you an example of what we're talking about here. So this is something that we like to use because we think it does a great job of making the key point. Like, this is not your grandma's nonlinear stretch. Okay, this is a patent pending new approach. We certainly didn't invent nonlinear stretch. It's been around for probably over 20 years in different forms. A lot of people kind of have other experiences with it, and they're used to seeing things get like stretched and distorted. And so, like, this is a great image because look at the football player on the back left on the top where the black bars are. You can see this is a safety back there. And then now look at him down on the part where it's got the nonlinear stretch on. He looks bigger, just like all the players do, because the image is larger, hence more immersive, but he doesn't look all distorted and stretched out. And this is key. And the way we do that uses a patent pending technique. The Envy is the only video processor that can do this. We compress vertically and we stretch horizontally rather than just stretching horizontally. And this means that we can basically share that geometric stretch across both axes. And that's what simultaneously, and that's what's never been done before. And by doing that, you don't wind up with things that look disfigured or catching your attention. Now, sometimes people will look at this and say, oh, well, we see you're cutting off some of the the bottom and some of the top. Yeah, so this is a preference thing. So the Envy gives you control. You can keep every original picture on the screen. Personally, we like to use a combination of some zoom and some stretch to get the most natural looking image and take parts of the image off that you may not need. So for example, and this drives me a bit batty, you may be watching a big sporting event and there's this giant fat ticker running across the whole bottom of the screen, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. And it's advertising next week's boxing match and recapping the news and all this. I mean, when I see that, I'm going click click and I am getting rid of the entire ticker. Like, why would I even want to see this? And so zoom that right off the screen, your image naturally gets larger, more immersive, even before you get in the stretch. So it allows you to kind of set that balance kind of how you want. Now, the other important thing to mention is that 16:9 users, and whether we're talking about a flat panel or an LED wall, we always like to say, hey, 16:9 users are people too. And so we keep them in mind as well. And they say, well, hey, how do I benefit from nonlinear stretch? Well, remember what I was saying earlier, that the Envy can fit any aspect ratio content to any aspect ratio screen. Okay. And so the same thing is true if you've got scope screen and you've got like a good, 1.5 feet, 2 feet above and below your screen, which you're losing about a third of the image for these black bars, you can actually restore about half of that on the top and bottom and not even know that it is running, which is a pretty cool feat when you think about it, because nonlinear stretch for the sidebars, you just kind of have to like dynamically stretch the last parts of the image. But for a 16:9 image, you got to stretch the entire thing from left to right without anybody noticing. So now if you try to stretch the entire image from top to bottom, things will start to get a little wonky, in my opinion. I've had customers tell me, yeah, I kind of can see that at times, but I'd rather see that than see any black bars. Personally, that's not how I would run it, but everyone is entitled to run their setup, how they feel is best. We recommend taking out about half the black bars or a little less, and that creates that much more immersive experience, without noticing that type of distortion.
Yeah, I'm guilty. I run a 16:9 here in our room, and I do exactly what you said, Richard. I cut off about 20 to 30% of the black bars, so that way if I am watching something that is in a 230 or 235, 237, 239, whatever, it does fill up more of my screen. And you really even I never even know what's 16:9 or what's
Right.
a 235 anymore. It fills up the screen, and you never really know the wiser that the MadVR Envy is running the whole time. So
Yeah, so just to clarify, Kellen, when you talk about zooming that off, I assume that you mean you're using an NV nonlinear stretch as opposed to like optical zoom.
correct. Yes. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah, no, it's okay. The reason I mention it is some people, like without an envy, will use that approach, where you can just zoom and crop. Um, and, that can be somewhat effective. But using the envy, being able to use some zoom, but stretch allows you to keep much more of the image on the screen without really cropping it off.
Yeah. You get to see who the people on the movie are talking to.
Right. Right. Up next, we have our subtitle management. And so this is one of the hero features that we had talked about before. And so if you look here, you can see this is a very typical scenario where you've got a scope movie on a scope screen, looks like this with or without a subtitle. Okay. And then what happens is you need to use your lens memory to zoom out, and you make it larger and larger and larger to the point where all four corners of the image touch the corner of the screen. And that's very effective. It works very well. Of course, the problem is if you go to the next screen, what happens to your subtitles, right? So your subtitles then move with the whole image. And what was supposed to be now in your black bar is now on the masking and on the wall. And it's even worse when it's 2 lines of subtitles, 3 lines of subtitles. And same thing for the top, right? So, sometimes you get closed captioning or things on top, like, doorbell rings or, something along those lines with 1 or 2 lines at the top. And so that can be obviously very distracting. So we wind up being forced to run like we saw on the previous slide, where you're essentially in kind of postage stamp mode. And so what we do instead, if you go to the next slide, we have it so that you can run the whole movie when there's no subtitles like this. And then if you go one more slide, please. When the subtitles come, we just bring back enough of the black bar to fit that subtitle. Okay. So, for example, in this case, we had 1 line of subtitle. We've got room for that. There's settings for how much padding you want, if you want extra space. What happens when the second subtitle line comes, right? We'll make room for the second one. What happens when the subtitles change on the top, but not the bottom, right? So imagine 2 lines of subtitles on the top, 3 lines of subtitles on the bottom. We dynamically will adjust on the fly. And here's a nice little interesting tidbit. Um, what's really interesting here, if you think about what we're doing, is we're shrinking the image down, right, to make room for this black bar. But notice, you would expect to have corresponding black bars on the left and right side as well, right? Because it's all being shrunk proportionally. What we're doing is we're layering just a little bit of nonlinear stretch to then get rid of the sidebars. So it's a beautiful kind of 1-2 combination to deliver, this experience and be able to enjoy the movies with the subtitles however you want. Now, sometimes people ask, well, how do you keep that black bar on the screen, right? Because it would be distracting if every time the subtitle went away and came back, the movie size was jumping back and forth. And so they actually have a setting called stickiness, which is separate for the top of the screen and for the bottom of the screen. And you can set that however you want. I think the default is like 15 seconds. I personally run it at 5 seconds. I want to get back to full screen as quickly as possible. There's some people that say, I don't want to see it moving at all during the movie, in which case you can set it to, there's literally a setting that says until the end of the movie. And when you set it to onto the end of the movie, it'll adjust for the subtitles that it needs when subtitles are in the content, and it'll hold it there till the end of the movie, and then it'll go back. So it's very customizable, just like everything else in the Envy, to deliver the experience that you as a customer want. So let's get to the big daddy, Motion AI, which has been in development about 2 years. I am especially proud of this because this is something that we really went through quite a lot of iterations with, and I absolutely love where we arrived in the end. For a while I thought, oh, this is so complex. One thing we really strive for with the Envy is really to use easy to use menus, something that's easy for integrators and for customers to use to play with without having to have a PhD in video processing. So how we would get this simplified was a question that we have been asking ourselves for a couple of years. But in the end, we think that it all came out great. So first, should we talk a little bit about Motion AI?
Yeah, take a dive in, Richard. I mean, we saw it firsthand at the Just Video Walls display, which, when you get motion jitter on screen with video televisions or video walls, it can be quite annoying to see.
Yeah, you may not notice it on a smartphone, but when you blow it up to 200 plus inches, it comes real apparent. So,
oh, yeah. So I'm very excited for you to take a deep dive into this subject.
Yeah, so the easiest way to explain it is that we, of course, didn't invent motion interpolation, right? We set out to be a company that could try to perfect it. And motion interpolation was invented to solve a very specific problem. But unfortunately, traditionally, it's come along with artifacts and the dreaded soap opera effect that has unfortunately caused most people to have a bad taste in their mouth when it comes to motion interpolation. It's almost like an evil word in the video world. And so this is really where it gets interesting. What is the problem that was trying to be solved in the first place? Why is this technology even on our TV, right? Because when you mention motion interpolation to people, it is the first thing most people say is, oh, you mean that thing that we all turn off the very second we get our TV, right? And that happens for two main reasons. Motion interpolation algorithms traditionally have introduced their own motion artifacts. So you're trying to solve one problem, but you're creating another problem, something distracting that's happening on the screen. And you're saying, oh, I don't want to deal with that. I would rather deal with the motion blur and the judder. Or it ruins the cinematic look of the movie, right? Because it's too strong. There's not enough control over that soap opera effect. And for those that may not know soap opera effect, there's a lot of people that do, but there's a lot of people that say, oh, can you explain this to me? It's generally, it gets its term from back in the day, soap operas that were on broadcast television and probably still are. They look like video, right? They don't look cinematic. They don't look like film. And that's because they are video and they're filmed at 60 frames per second, whereas movies are all at 24 frames per second. right? So if you think about it, if a movie is going at 24 frames in each second compared to 60 frames in each second, it will have a tendency to have judder. And what we mean by judder is kind of like this shake, or excessive motion blur. And if you don't mind, let's take kind of a step back and say, well, why has this been a problem, especially lately, right? In the most recent years. And we have a great white paper on our website at madvrenvy.com in the resources section for anyone who wants to do a deeper dive. But the gist of it is that modern display technologies, whether we're talking about OLED, LED, LCD, all these technologies, they use what's called sample and hold. Okay. And that means basically they show the image for 1/24th of a second and they hold it there during that time. And when it's time for the next frame, it instantly changes to the next one. So there's not this, it's just this to the next frame. Okay. And there's something called persistence of vision, okay, which is a phenomenon that we experience. The way we see as humans, we cannot process things that instantly teleport or jump from one spot to another. Like in real life, nothing jumps from place to place, right? But in modern day displays, that's exactly what's happening. And when our eyes see that, so if you broke it down with like a high speed camera, you would not see any blur or judder. You would just see two sequential frames that are just jumping from spot one to spot two. Our eyes can't process that because of this concept called persistence of vision. So we make sense of it in our brains by motion, by blurring that. Our eyes kind of take frame one and frame two and blend them together. And that creates this perceived motion blur. And so if you look back at traditional film projection, they had a black bar right between these frames. And so that bar, as it rolled past, would break up that image, right? Or in CRT, the image is being painted. And it's being painted. And by the time it gets to the end, it's already fading off the top. Okay. And so what we're doing now is we've come up with a way to, if you look at what we're trying to solve, is how do we get this image that's using sample and hold to not create this, right? So back to CRT, by the time the image is done painting at the bottom, it's already fading off the top. Again, breaking of vision. And same thing with plasmas, right? Plasmas did not have this issue either, because the way the plasma gases worked is they would get excited, but then they would kind of fade. So that's the real difference, right? Whereas modern day displays, they don't have that ability, and it's persistent. So motion interpolation was invented as a way to try to defeat the sample and hold effect. And that's essentially kind of what got us into this situation. But like mentioned, because of soap opera and motion AI, you run into other issues. So if you could bring that slide back where we last were, Kellen, or Shane, I should say.
Absolutely. Incredible explanation there, Richard. I don't think I've ever had it explained to me like that before.
Yeah. Thanks, Zach. And like I was saying, there's a white paper. It's not overly long or overly technical that really kind of talks about this in detail and the science behind it and why this happens. So these are traditionally motion interpolation causes things like pieces of images to disappear, where you see on and off here in the top left. It's hard to see here. I don't know if you go a little bit stronger, but like part of his face is missing. I believe this is from the opening of Skyfall, the motorcycle chase in the beginning. And so if you look, like you can see where it's off, forget the color difference that's just in the camera, but you can see like part of his face is actually disappearing where it's on. Or the lady in the red dress, like you could see her leg is literally like in two pieces. Likewise, if you zoom back out a little bit, you see the halo effect around his head, or the broken blinds. Like all those lines are supposed to be connected. Or the young lady in the bottom right, this kind of profile, if you follow the kind of red marker around it, you can see the giant halo and blur that's occurring. from there. So these are the kinds of things that have plagued motion interpolation algorithms for years, and one of the chief complaints. And what we did is we set out to use AI and machine learning to create algorithms to be able to solve this, which had never been done before in a dedicated video processor. The Envy is the only such product where you can get this type of processing in a processor, especially AI based. And the other issue is the soap opera effect, right? And this is a hotly debated topic and something that we have a lot of great conversations about with people in the industry, across the industry, as well as customers. And it's a really interesting thing because some people just really do not like any form of motion interpolation whatsoever. And they say, hey, I want to watch as a director intended, right? And that means I turn off all motion handling. However, as we just talked about, you have these inherent displays like with sample and hold. Just because you turn off all the motion handling doesn't necessarily mean your display is rendering it how the director intended, because these displays can oftentimes lead to exaggerated motion blur and judder. Okay. And so we have like a very low mode called cinematic. And what cinematic does is it just takes the edge off. Okay. It's still, no matter how sensitive people say they are to motion handling, we can put the Envies on low, and then it will run, and you can't even tell it's running until you take it off. And when you have it on, you still see it preserves a full cinematic look. You still have the motion blur, you still have the judder, but when you take it off, you realize to the degree that it's really creating, this excessive amount, right? So the ironic thing is, well, we turn all our processing off because we don't want to mess with director's intent, but the display itself may be preventing you from getting really what the director may have intended, and being able to counteract, right? Just counteract the sample and hold effect can make a big difference on those things, right? So the bottom line becomes what we did with Motion AI, in addition to minimizing the types of artifacts that motion handling can introduce, we've also created an entire variable range of control that you have on the soap opera effect. So whether you are a purist and you really don't like it at all, you can use just a pinch of it and still have great benefit while preserving the full cinematic look, all the way up to something really what we actually have in a mode called Insane, and now an Insane Plus, which is really over the top, super strong. And again, it's a personal opinion. Some people like it, they want it. Personally, for me, it depends on what I'm watching, right? Like, you wouldn't believe how many concerts there are that are filmed at 24p, right? And you're watching them dance around the stage and perform and swinging their guitars and putting on this great performance, and the drummer is going and hands are moving, but you see all this judder, right? In real life, like, personally, I don't really want to see that look cinematic. Like, I want it to look like I'm there, right? I want the sound makes me feel like I'm there, right? So why shouldn't the video make me feel like I'm there? And this is all about elevating that experience, right? So for something like that, I'll use our Insane or even Insane Plus. One of the cool things that we're doing is we're driving these displays now at 120p. So a lot of people, maybe they do some gaming at 120p, but you're watching 4K 24 now at 4K 120, while it actually still looks like 4K 24, which is pretty cool. Or you're watching it at 4K 48 or 60 if your display doesn't support either. That really allows us to, so that variability, right? Being able to, like, imagine a shower, right, where your only options are cold, warm, or scorching hot, right? You're just not going to use that shower. Like, that's just bothersome, right? Like, but so if my shower lets me set the temperature, right, for the situation, if I want something a little hotter, like on a cold day, I've been outside stuck shoveling for an hour, I'm gonna make that shower a little hotter. If I'm coming after a workout, right? And I'm already pretty hot. I'm going to take that shower a little cooler. So that same analogy applies to content, depending on what people are watching, especially a documentary like Planet Earth 2, or like I said, a concert, you can watch it higher. And for something cinematic or super cinematic, you can use just a pinch of it or anything in between. And so those are really industry first, being able to minimize the artifacts that are being introduced while also having unlimited control virtually over the amount of motion smoothness and soap opera effect that you want.
Simply incredible, Richard. And I was excited to hear more about that Insane Plus mode. You also had mentioned that there were some DTM tweets. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so our dynamic tone mapping, I don't know if you guys have a little image, a little snippet that I had sent over. It's not on this slide. It would be in the email that I had sent, just kind of pasted in there. And if you don't have it, it's okay. But essentially what this thing does is allows you to tune how you want the tone mapping to work. Okay. And what do I mean by that? Well, this is its own deep dive, so I'm just going to keep it really surface level and simple in the interest of time. But essentially, HDR for home cinema is oftentimes coded in a way that cannot be reproduced by today's home cinema technologies, right? Like 4,000 nits, and something's designed to be super saturated and super bright at the same time, right? And you cannot achieve both, right? So it's up to the tone mapping algorithm to say, wow, okay, this is supposed to be super bright and super saturated. What am I supposed to do with it? Because it literally cannot achieve both at the same time, because the display is not able to do that. And so these types of new controls that we've added just in the past few weeks allow you as the end user to set what you want the preference to be. Do you prefer it to look a little brighter and a little whiter in that kind of situation? Or would you rather it be a little bit darker, but more richly saturated? And so in the past, the Envy would make that decision for you. But now we kind of expose a couple of high level controls. And the default is balanced, right? Where we have, from talking with hundreds of customers and showing them and people that have provided an amazing amount of feedback and help with, kind of honing in these features. We know kind of like where balance should be. And then you can also kind of then saturate it or desaturate it from there. And you can control the highlights separately, from the actual general HDR. So you can almost think of it as a dynamic saturation control that affects the highlights differently than the surrounding areas, if that does a trick for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate it, Richard. So I think we've covered about everything with the Envy. I really appreciate you coming on today. I wanted to kind of close out with Kellen giving a overview of the different models that are available, as well as the pricing and some of the key feature differences between those models. Over to you, Kellen.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. So they're going to have the MadVR Envy Mark II. There's going to be two separate versions. There's the Pro version, and then there's the Extreme version. I think it's going to be easiest to start with the Extreme version. That's going to have everything that we talked about and discussed today: dynamic tone mapping, geometry correction, dynamic tone mapping, motion AI, and basically anything that MadVR may have coming down the pipeline as of right now. The Pro version is going to be a little bit stripped down version of the Extreme. So you're going to lose motion AI, you're going to lose the geometry correction, but you're still going to have the ability to have dynamic tone mapping and the nonlinear stretch, subtitle sublimation. But you're really just going to lose the geometry correction, motion AI, and the upgrade paths going forward. The price points that these come in at, the Pro versions are going to be $94.95, so just shy of $9,500. and then the Extreme is just south of 16,000. So it's going to be 15,995.
Awesome. Thanks, Kellen. Now we wanted to open up the floor to comments. Now that we've kind of ran through everything, is there anything that you guys would like to ask the Dreamedia team or Richard about MadVR?
There's an Epson 4010. Would it make a difference on the 4010?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Epson projectors. They really do a great job and a great job for the money. Like the LS 12,000 at $5,000 is a great value. And we have had people that have purchased an Envy Extreme and paired it with like an Epson that they bought off of eBay for $500, right? Like not everyone will, some people will do these things. Up on our YouTube channel, there is a video that shows like the Envy on an I think it might have been on the 6050 at the time. It was from a year or two ago. Put up against another projector that didn't have an Envy. And you could watch that. That was done at a conference. And you can watch that to kind of see the differences and judge it from yourself. The bottom line is, it's going to just greatly improve any display. The question becomes, is it
The
worth
limitations
it
of the display itself at that
Right.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that one. I want to say it was a 6050 versus a Sony 6000 ES at M-Wave. And our photographer interviewed people in the hallway to ask them their thoughts, and many thought that the Epson outperformed the Sony. That was a very interesting shootout.
Yeah, like we were talking earlier, you can generally pair the Envy with any display to take it leaps and bounds beyond its price class and performance class. But then, of course, like in fairness, you put that same Envy on another thing. So it also kind of comes down to budget too, right? It's a matter of pairing up something that really kind of makes the most sense for you and where you place the importance of video quality relative to your budget and rest of your system.
Will it cause any issues with video game systems going through it?
So the Envy does have introduced lag intentionally. And so we do have a 0 latency output. Some people game through it just fine. Certainly not for competitive gaming. So what we recommend is that there's a couple of things that you can do. One is you can use the 0 latency pass-through port on the back of the Envy and just not use the Envy processing for that. Or alternatively, you can just switch around it. So like sometimes you may not have 2 HDMI runs that go to your projector, but there's a way to do some kind of fancy stuff with like a 4x4 switch where you're basically routing one of the outputs back into one of the inputs, and you can route right around it. We are working on some things that we anticipate will greatly reduce the latency going forward. But in the meantime, those are great ways. That's how most people deal with that. Or they just don't mind the latency for the types of games and the way they like to use their system.
Right.
Richard, one question that I have, I see the introduction to motion AI. Is there anything that you could touch on that you're going to also use AI in the future? AI tone mapping or anything of the sorts?
Yeah, and I was thinking about that too when you were talking about the differences between editions, because it's probably only fair to mention too that a lot of the AI-based features will also be exclusive in the Envy Extreme, largely due to the processing power that's involved. And even, by the way, we should also mention that the Mark 1 also runs motion AI, although we waited the earliest versions. The Mark II does have some advantages, in particular with motion AI. For example, Insane Plus can only run that on the Envy Extreme Mark II. But yeah, so I mean, there's not specific things I can really talk about just yet. But we do have AI training and things going on where you're going to see more AI-based features, things that have been done in the past without AI that is going to take things to another level with adding the AI approach, just like we've done with motion AI.
Cool. Awesome.
Can
Maybe
you
big announcements at CEDIA time then. Fingers
Yeah.
crossed.
We'll be sure to update you guys with any and all updates from MadVR. Stay tuned to our YouTube channel, Shane Lee's YouTube channel. Shane, we have any other questions, or do you have anything that you'd like to ask Richard?
can you upscale all content to 8K for supporting projectors?
Yeah, so the Envy Extreme is the only video processor on the market that, in addition to having features like subtitle management or the way we do nonlinear stretch, or the massive size LUTs that we support, we also are the only video processor that can upscale beyond 4K. So we can take any resolution up to and scale it up to 8K. So depending on the capabilities of the display, the same way you would generally want to use an Envy to upscale 1080p to 4K for your display, is the same way that you would generally want to use an Envy to upscale 4K to 8K on displays that can support it. So that's really going to be difference in detail and fine level detail. And I have to say that the differences are not going to be dramatic,
Right.
but usually for our audience, it's all about performance. And the reason we're all into this and have products across all sorts of price ranges, people like to seek out that exceptional level of performance. So being able to upscale from 4K to 8K really can offer some nice benefits.
Yeah. Here's a question. The AI update, are you able to give the owners designated settings for the Mark 1 and Mark 2? I've just updated my Mark 1. I was hoping suggested setting. Thanks, gentlemen.
Yeah, I understand the question. So I was thinking for a second if I might even try to pronounce this username, Lebubwa3. So that's a great question. Essentially, if you've updated to the very latest version, I think we're on firmware like 1.8.0.2 right now. We've greatly simplified all the options. So essentially what you'd want to do is make sure that the output frame rate is set to auto. Okay, and then you turn motion AI on that settings to on for movies. Also for sports, if you want to do that, like it's really cool. We're doing 4K that mentions, but we're doing like 4K 60 to 4K 120. And watching sports like that is really neat. Also, so that's kind of cool. But right now it's so simple. So it used to be very complex. You had to pick from all sorts of different sliders and numbers, but we've once we got down to that release mode, we have it set. So you have essentially 5 different looks. You have cinematic, low, balanced, high, insane, and I guess now also insane plus. And so you just pick one of those, and that's going to get you to where you want to be. For those that are very adventurous, we also have a custom setting in there that lets you get in and mess with the old school sliders to really fine tune or kind of create your own look, if you will. But largely that's really not necessary anymore. So the bottom line is you've got now these 5 core presets. Best advice is to set the auto. There's a preferred frame rate option. If your display supports 120, set it to 120. If your display supports 48, even better, set it to 48. Otherwise, you're going to be running at 60, which is fine too. Just doesn't have quite the same level of control and refinement when you're going from 24 to 60 than you do from 24 to 48 or 120. So hopefully that answers your question.
Are NV Extreme users of the Mark 1 missing out greatly from Mark 2 versions?
I do not think so right now. I mean, a lot of people ask like, hey, like what are the core differences and should I be upgrading? And the reality is the Mark One is still a very, very capable unit. There is a there are units available for pre-owned because it's part of the Mark II trade-in program. People will trade in their Mark IIs or Mark Ones, and those Mark One units get sold as authorized pre-owned units. And so those units are super, super capable. Would you notice a difference? Well, you know, you've got double the amount of horsepower in the Mark II, essentially. And so it depends on what you're doing with it. Motion AI is one area in particular where you're going to start to notice differences in capabilities, right? So there's only so much GPU horsepower available, even in both. And so, for example, like Insane Plus, which is really kind of cool, fun mode, and has some advantages over Insane for those that like really strong motion handling. Like that takes so much CPU power that will only run on a Mark II. A Mark One, there's actually trying not to get too far into the weeds, but there's something like 4 or 5 different AI models. You know, they have Dragon Mouth, a hybrid 2, you know, Big, all these different models. And so the Envy will automatically pick the AI model to use based on situations such as frame rate, such as how many features are on and what you're asking to do, and whether you have a Mark One or Mark Two. So the experience can be enhanced on the Mark II, but you know, I wouldn't say that it is make or break, you know, type of thing. Now, as the products continue to evolve, we roll out more AI-based features, the gap's going to continue to grow. But as of right now, my recommendation is if you're happy with your Mark One and that floats your boat, then you know maybe stick with the Mark One. If you're interested in you know upgrading to the latest and greatest and like some of the other improvements that it brings as well, then you know there's always a Mark II option as well.
What if you just want to keep it as pure as possible? You just want that aspect ratio switching and the tone mapping. Should I stay
Yes.
Mark One or go to
Yeah.
Mark Two?
Well, I mean, in that case, you'd be good with, you know, either Mark One or Mark Two, but also most importantly, an MB Pro, you know, will do the job there as well. So I think Kellen did a great job summing up some of the key differences. So things like upgradability in the future are not particularly important to someone, or things like motion AI or geometry control, upscaling beyond 4K, these types of things. You can find that the Pro is just an exceptional solution as well.
This gentleman's question. I think this is totally different than you guys, right? The MadVR for HTPC and the
Yeah,
software.
no, it's all kind of
same?
comes from the
Okay.
same place. So yeah, Motion AI is a feature exclusive to the Envy, and not just the Envy, but also the Envy Extreme.
Is there will a paid MadVR software edition come out?
I can say that this is a topic that we'll be happy to talk about at some point, you know, in the future. So feel free to email us, you know, for any more information about the MadVR for HTPC.
Hey, interesting. Well, all right, Richard and Zach and Kellen, thanks guys for hopping on the stream today. Hopefully, we got enough information out there to inform future buyers. What is that? Can we do one of these here? All right. So, all right. So thanks. Listen, I'll leave some links down below in this video's description if you want to pick up a MadVR or anything from Dreamedia. Zach, Richard, Kellen, where can they find you guys for future updates?
Yeah, definitely, guys. Stay tuned to our YouTube channel over at Dreamedia. We'll be putting out content every single day, bringing you the latest and greatest technologies in the industry. But keep in mind, we don't only sell MadVR. What we really do here at Dreamedia is different from the rest of the industry. We like to look at the whole picture. We like to take a look at your space and really tailor a package specific to your exact situation, your room, and your budget. And it's free. We offer free video consultations because we want happy customers. You look around in every single state around the country, you're going to see Dreamedia is 5-star rated. And that's because we take care of our customers and we hand curate these packages specific to your needs. That's all I got for you. Guys, we're nationwide. We'd love the opportunity to earn your business. Thanks for having us on, Shane.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, thank you, Shane and Kellen and Zach. It really was a pleasure to be with you guys here today. These are always a lot of fun with you guys.
Yeah, nice to see you, Richard.
Thank you.
All right, Dreamedia family, that is a wrap. Big thanks, everybody, for tuning in with us today. As you can see, the MadVR is the ultimate video processor. If you're interested in learning more, you'd like to build your very own dream home theater, reach out today for a free video consultation. We do things different here at Dreamedia. We want to get hands-on. We want to help with the full-blown system design, speaker layout, sight lines. We can even do 3D renderings and 3D animation fly-throughs, really bringing your vision to life. So it's more than just a video processor here at Dreamedia. We sell everything that you need to bring your dream home theater to life. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it informative in helping you make a buying decision. If you like this video, be sure to give us a big thumbs up and smash that subscribe button down below for more. Till next time, this is Zach with Dreamedia Home Theater. Thank you for watching.